Welcome to session 4. We are moving into Christmas music, which is a lot of fun when you start to think about all of the possibilities. Although I'm not, I'm not gonna say I'm a fan of like rocking around the Christmas tree. I think some songs are great until you hear them 1 million times. Okay, so let's look at this week. We'll have our usuals, essential questions, and reading and viewing assignments, and see what movie we have coming up this week. And then we're going to have a little bit of difference in our assignments. We have our discussion as always, but we're going to have 2 different submitted assignments. And remember, they're all connected, so some things that we're going to do in a submitted assignment are going to go into our discussion next week. So make sure you're ready to copy and paste so that you can make wise use of your time. Our essential questions this week are: what is a literary composition, for which I have a slide in a moment? What is the influence of secular literature on the celebration of Christmas? And I think this is a lot of fun because a lot of what we look at, we don't necessarily know if it is purely secular or not. And so we have to start looking into sort of the depths of that. In another class that I teach, we talk about Christian writers. And some people obviously are in that category because they share their faith very clearly. They make that to a central point. But there are also a ton of writers who don't make that a central tenet. And we have to say, well, why and how is that working? And we end up with some really interesting and exciting things. So, for instance, in that class, we look at Flannery O'Connor, who wrote decades ago, and we can see sort of the questions that she had about faith and how she portrayed faith within her characters. Then, how do we compare and contrast secular and religious celebrations of Christmas? Obviously, lots of celebrations are happening around this time of the year, and some of them are solely focused on Christmas, but we don't want to leave out Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all of the other joyous celebrations of people gathering. So there are lots of pieces from all of them that are a mixture of secular and religious. Then, finally, how could hymns and carols be considered a form of literature? So, these first and fourth questions, let's look at a little bit here. So, when we were analyzing literature, when we started that process, I said that there were 3 questions we should always ask. First, what does it say? What's on the page? What's the concept? But then I said, how does it say it? And that's where we start to say, is it a short story? Um, is it a poem? Like, what sort of pieces are being used here? And that's where music comes in. If you look at the lyrics of a song and you take away the sound and you just look at what's written there, you'll often start to see stanzas. You'll see the chorus, the bridge, you'll see rhyme schemes, you'll start to see all of these pieces that are also part of poetry. So while not every song is a poem and not every poem is a song, there is going to be a good amount of overlap. And then of course we got to our end one, which was, what does it mean? And that is where the depth and the joy come from when we're looking at a song, a poem, a short story, a novel, or a film. Here's our big question though. We're talking about this idea of sort of literature. We're saying, let's go back to that slide. What is a literary composition? What makes it a literary composition? So I think a good question to start with is, what separates literature, a literary composition, from a text message? Or what about those poems that are in really nice cards? What makes those different than poetry? Are they separate? A lot of times great poems are used in, say, to text someone, or they're part of a card that we pick up at the grocery store. So when we're looking at these big ideas of, what makes it literature, we're looking for something that qualifies. So in that sense, that sounds kind of, I don't know, snobbish, I think, in some ways. But when we're looking at what counts, we're looking for a cohesive decision. So we're looking for professionals, we're looking for academics, we're looking for society, we're looking for all together to come together and say, yes, this counts. So we're looking at things like To Kill a Mockingbird. We're looking at APA 7 now includes the Bible in a different form for referencing. It has always been part of classics, works that we all put down as, you should read that. that should be in your frame of reference and your knowledge base. And that includes a tremendous number of works. And that's where we get to concepts of time. It can be very hard to say what today is literature because we may love a particular story. There's nothing wrong with loving a story, absolutely not. But not every story is going to be literature or should be literature. I've read tons of books that I've absolutely enjoyed. When I was a child, I read a lot of Janet Oak and things like that. But they're not literature. And it's because they aren't sort of pushing the envelope of how we process storytelling. A great story, a lot of fun and interesting interaction, something that we enjoy, doesn't have to be literature. And literature can be exciting, it can be boring, it can be any number of things. I often go to James Joyce as my example of great literature. Not because I like reading him. I don't. I don't like most of his stories. I like a handful of them. However, when he wrote Ulysses, he changed the world. He wrote what we now call literature of the mundane. He wrote everything that happened to a person in a day. Imagine your day written out chapter after chapter. How long it took you to eat lunch. It'd be taking your bath during the day. It'd be really boring, wouldn't it? Most of the great stories are about the great moments in our lives. But he didn't do that. He wrote a story about just a day, and it's boring. But it's really important because it is a social and societal artifact. You could walk through through Dublin on a walking tour for many, many years. Even now, there are still parts of it that you can get to, and it's exactly what it was 100 years ago. But also, he opened a door. And now we include those mundane things. It helps us feel connected. And it led to stream of consciousness. And that led to the likes of J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. It led to other writers doing other interesting things. And that means we get what we get today. And so many interesting avenues for literature. So when we're looking at all of these stories and ideas, some are literature. Some are part of that grand scheme. But not all of them are. And whatever we look at it, as long as we're getting something out of it, if we enjoy it, if we have an emotion from what we read, then it works and we've succeeded in that process. But we're looking, especially here, we're going to read a lot of different pieces, and we're looking at these hymns and carols and things like that, and they are great poetic works that have stood the test of time. So they fall into those categories. Okay, session 4 is a little weird when we start to look at the reading and viewing assignments. So as you can see here, we have number 1, we select from 2 options. So we're looking at something from number 1 or something from the second section, which is all 3 of these poems. So 1, the first 2 chapters of Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. 2, we could read Robert Herrick's Ceremonies for Christmas. 3, we could read Old Christmas by Irving Washington. Or 4, we could read all 3 of these poems, these short works. Then we also want to read O Come, Emmanuel, obviously a wonderful hymn, a carol. We want to read Longfellow's Christmas Bells, and we want to watch White Christmas. So rather than try to sort of navigate this and figure out what exactly we mean, I made little charts so you can see that you could pick from these different sections. So you can read those 3 poems and then read those 2 and watch the film. You could, as you can see, they're each connected. So hopefully that helps little. Pick one of the green squares, and that's what you should read. Everything that's in a green square. Just pick one green square and read everything. A little bit simpler than the idea as it is written out. So I found that a tad confusing. Hopefully this is clearer. Just pick a green square and read and watch everything in it. So we have 3 assignments this week, as we will in session 5. We're looking at reflecting, Christmas reflections. We're watching White Christmas for our usual discussion thread. Then we're going to share a paper the same way we often do, where we're reflecting on themes and ideas from this term. Finally, we are going to share with me this week the ornament project, and then you will share some info from that in the next session. Remember, copy and paste. Whatever you use this week can directly go into next week's. So first things first, here are 2 questions about White Christmas. So I think I mistyped that part. let's go to themes. We don't always have a great title for it. So first, why is White Christmas considered a classic Christmas movie? There are lots of possibilities here. Does it accurately reflect the themes of Christmas? And again, it isn't just one answer that can go here. I think that's what's really important about pretty much every discussion we have here. There are different ways to look at each part and what it means to us and how it influences us. And we're going to have different responses to that. To me, this is one of my all-time favorite movies. My absolute favorite Christmas movie is Arthur Christmas, which I adore. And honestly, it's a lot like this in the sense that we have people who from different situations and circumstances, they all end up together, and then they realize that someone needs love, and love in a way that they perhaps haven't shared love before, and they have to come together and figure that out. So I think that is like a core concept for many of these things, and to me that's very Christmassy, and it's very part of every day because we need to see who needs that love, and we need to figure out how we're going to share it. It's a lot like our service project, to be honest. But what do you see? What catches your attention? What is beautiful or interesting or wild about it? Next, our submitted assignment, not our ornament yet. We are looking at Christmas again, of course, and this time we're looking at the different works that we're reading, and we are analyzing the literature's treatment of the celebration of Christmas. How does it represent a secular or Christian view? What do we see in it? Interestingly enough, especially as you go back in time, you'll see that what could have started off as secular sometimes gets absorbed into Christian, and what is Christian can get absorbed the opposite way. So it's really interesting based on what you choose to look at, what you will find in it. So we're looking at 1 to 2 pages. I went ahead and moved some things over because the choices. So choose one of the readings for this session or any combination of them. So not only do you have everything that you chose from your little box, but you can pick something not in your box. You can pick a different box for the paper. And let me find the right slide. You can also add one of these things to it. So the links are in the course shell for all of these. Things like The Night Before Christmas, maybe picking some secular Christmas songs from a previous week. Yes, Virginia, there's a Santa Claus. We have that in the student lounge, and that is linked in session 3 as well. A wonderful part that we're going to look at in session 5, if you choose that particular paper in session 5, is the Christmas truce. There is a wonderful event from 1914 era where the two sides paused during World War I, and they played together. They just had a wonderful Christmas together, and then they went back to their trenches and began the war again the day after. So a really intense but really beautiful symbol of that togetherness. And of course, things like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, another one of my favorites. There are so many possibilities. So this list, it could be from one of those lists, it could be something you've read this term. Obviously, there are a lot of options, and it could even be one of the films we're looking at. So have fun. You get to pick. And now we're finally turning this in. We're creating that original ornament, and you are going to share it with me this term, this particular session. So in session 4, you share it with me. Session 5, you're going to share it with your classmates. So you're going to write a 1-page summary of your project. You're going to tell me about why you've done it. What significance does it have? How does it relate to what we have seen or watched or experienced this term and throughout the ideas of Christmas? Now remember, that information is stuff that you can slide right into your session 5, where we will have a short section where we share sort of what we saw or experienced, and we share our ornament with everyone else. So you can take something from that 1-page summary. You only need a sentence or 2, and you can share your pictures of it as well in session 5. But in this one, you're going to write me a little page and share your ornament with me. And of course, White Christmas, it looks like it's only to buy, to rent, although I'm seriously considering buying because I love that one. But we're looking at Google Play and iTunes and Microsoft and all that. But as always, try to see if someone has a copy that you can borrow or look at. finally, a reminder that your service project is going to be due in session 5, and that we are looking for all of these wonderful ideas. This is what's going to be due in session 5 is that 2-page paper that tells me about it. And then you're going to share a couple sentences with your classmates in a discussion about what your experience was. And remember, we're talking about our community. What do we need and what do people around us need? And community can be people in our home. It can be things that make up our community. So homes and animals and businesses, all these different things that need our support. So see what's out there and what needs you this term. I hope you enjoy exploring this idea of, what makes a literature, and especially in terms of our hymns and carols, which are wonderful poems when we take away the sound that goes with them. In fact, I often encourage students who are struggling with poetry to put some music on when they are reading it, because we can work that both ways and get more out of it.